Welcome to the Code for Couples podcast, focusing on topics for law enforcement officers and couples to keep you and your relationship connected, resilient, and code for. Now, your host, law enforcement expert Cyndi Doyle, author of Hold the Line and My Wife.
Hey there, and welcome back to Code for Couples. I am your host, Cyndi Doyle, licensed professional counselor, law enforcement spouse, and author of Hold the Line. Today, I am excited to have Monica Crawford on. I kind of stalked her for a little while and asked her if she wanted to come on the podcast. And I think she was somewhat hesitant and was like, who's this crazy law enforcement spouse woman? And eventually we connected, and then scheduling led to problems. So we have been trying to do this for 6 months now, but let me tell you a little bit about Monica and why I wanted her to come on the podcast. She is a former law enforcement officer who now empowers trailblazing women, especially those in male-driven fields, to recognize their worth, reclaim their strength mentally and physically, and rise together through support, compassion, and connection. She is saying like all the things that I preach all the time. So I loved this. She is author of a really good book called Thriving Inside the Thin Blue Line, where she talks about her story, and there's all these different components that really focus on women thriving within the blue line, which is what I want to talk about too. And she is host of a podcast, which I love, and her podcast is Thriving Inside the Thin Blue Line. Oh yeah, by the way, she is also a law enforcement officer spouse as well. She just hits all the buttons. And so, Monica, thank you so much for coming on. I am very excited to talk in multiple directions today. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
I know that you focus on supporting women and have focused for a while on the first responder field, but I know you're expanding that to other areas, which we'll talk about at the end. Females have such a different experience throughout this career. And I don't get enough females talking on this podcast about how it is different for them and the challenges that they go through. We know that the culture is male dominated, which makes it hard to be appreciated for what women can bring to the career. There's also hazing and bullying, and women operate differently. They can actually bring a lot to the career and the job. And there's research that shows the benefits of having women in the department and their approaches to situations differently. So I wanted you to start off by talking about some of the challenges that you see for women, either inside law enforcement or in first responder. But I'm interested specifically in law enforcement because I know that was your personal experience.
Yeah, so I think early on, it's almost like if you look at history as a whole, like everything existed like in the early beginnings of civilization, like for the white male, right? So like law enforcement, when you look, again, not getting like into race or anything, but just calling it what it is. When you look into law enforcement and you see the majority of it, I mean, there's more diversity now, but when you look at most departments, especially the rural ones, there's a bunch of old white guys. Like, let's call it for what it is. Not knocking it. Like, it's just more of what you see, right?
Yeah.
And we have to joke and make fun of them all because they all look the same. Or give them a hard time, rather.
No,
but
I get it.
You're coming into the field knowing that you're at a disadvantage because you're trying to penetrate the boys' club, if you will. It's somewhat of a boys' club. It's called a brotherhood. And women are the weaker sex. So they're already looking at you at a disadvantage going, well, you can't lift as much as I can. You can't run as fast as I can. What makes you think that you can drag my ass out of a burning building or shooting or fill in the blank when shit hits the fan? So there's that misconception too of like, well, women aren't as strong. Okay, fair. We have to work harder to level the playing field for us, essentially. Is the way I look at it. I think women are just as capable as men. I think for a lot of us, that means we have to work twice as hard to be able to rise to that level. But we know that's what we're getting into, right? When we do that. The problem lies in where you prove yourself and then all of a sudden it's not good enough. And then you prove yourself again and then all of a sudden it's not good enough. And so it's one of these terms I put in my book that's called moving the goalposts. which is an emotional, which is an emotional abuse term. And that's essentially what it is you feel like you're meeting the standard. And also, as I would think this would be the same for most rookies, but especially for female rookies, we're looking for approval in some sense because we want to make sure we're doing a good job and we're rising to the level that we need to be at, right? But where we lose ourselves is chasing opinions that are constantly changing and chasing standards that are constantly changing. And the standards not being equal for everybody, essentially, in their application. I dealt with that too towards the end of my career when I got thrown into an internal affairs process where the standard was applied to me differently than it was to everybody else. So I always say my biggest lesson in law enforcement was losing myself in order to please others. I went through a big identity crisis with that, where I lost myself because it was the constant reinforcement of I was never good enough. Nothing I did was ever good enough.
I being in therapy and working with women in law enforcement, I understand what you're saying there, because the fitting in and the approval is built into us as far as human nature. And so in a field where we're supposed to have each other's back, you want to make sure that you are physically and mentally safe, right? That if I'm going to go in, that you're going to have my back and I'm going to have yours. And so you hit the nail on the head that I think a lot of women struggle with being able to remain who they are at their core, and how difficult it can be to go into an environment day in and day out that requires that they adjust. It makes it impossible because when you do something 12 hours a day, your brain gets trained to do it that way. And so that then rolls out in who you wind up developing to be personally and kind of losing yourself, like you said.
Unfortunately, in just the last 2 days, I've had 2 different conversations. One with a female law enforcement officer who is early enough in her career. She said she's still on probation with her department. So I'm not sure, she didn't tell me exactly how long she's been there, but she's still on probation with her department. And then another separate female who's graduating her fire academy tomorrow. Both of them saying, well, when I was in the academy or early on, I had a training sergeant or somebody in a training capacity who was another male basically telling me I don't belong here. And so it hits you in the face early on too, especially when you're young, especially when you're new. You're trying to build your own confidence, and then you already have somebody coming at you, like batting you down before you even get the chance to build your own confidence and step into your own.
How do women, I'm going to focus on women in particular, how do women, or how did you have that awareness, or what happened for you to have that awareness that you weren't aligned with who you really are?
I think I realized, it's like hindsight's 2020. I realized I lost myself after I chose to remove myself from that environment. It was more so in the healing process that I had recognized that. I just knew at the time, and again, the majority of this experience was 3.5 years within one specific police department that's local to me. I had other experiences with other agencies that were more positive than this. So it's not all of it is this way for everybody listening out there. But while I was within this department, towards the end of my career, I found myself in three different disciplinary actions in the span of like 6 weeks. Coming from somebody who's never had a disciplinary issue in my entire life, I had a target put on my back essentially because I spoke up against something and ruffled some feathers the wrong way. And also it was another sergeant who was a captain at the time who had tried to get inappropriate with me that I'd pushed back on. A lot of people can fill in the blanks there because that's another common thing of young women getting hit on in departments like that. So for me at the time, because of all of that was happening so like in succession, like I just knew my mental health was in the gutter at the time. And so for me, it was like, I need to get out because I see myself going down a bad path. And if I don't do something about it now, I don't want to know where I'll end up. For me and who I am, I know when I get angry, I lose my filter. And so I'm like, I'm going to tell the wrong person off and I'm going to lose my filter and it's going to ruin my career. Like that's literally what I was worried about. Like I was worried about twisting off on the wrong person. I don't think I would have done it to the public necessarily. I think I probably would have told like a coworker or some sergeant maybe off in the department, you know, But I didn't want to allow myself to get to that point because that's not who I am. That was just somebody that like just in that place, it was just like I was getting poked and poked and poked and poked and poked. And I was like at that point where I was about to boil over. And so that was like a self-preservation move for me to pull myself back from that environment.
I think that takes a lot of courage to do that. I interviewed AK Dosanti a couple weeks ago, and she had a similar story that it was like it was the courage that to say I'm more important. And it seems like sadly that's a theme, right? It's like, okay, not everybody has the same story, and it does seem like that story is being told a lot, that it's a sacrificing of self. I think that's unique to women, and I think it's not unique to women at this point. I think there's a lot of men also coming up through the ranks that are like, I'm recognizing I'm losing myself well on this burnout that we're experiencing. You know, women are told that we can do anything, right? I grew up in the I can bring home the bacon and fry it up in the pan era and, you know, not forget to tell him he's a man, like that kind of conditioning, that societal expectation or that cultural expectation of taking care of the house, the kids. And what I would say in law enforcement too, right? You're all day, you're showing up as one way, you're getting authority. You were having probably to overcompensate because of how you were seen as a woman to show up to say like, oh no, I'll prove you wrong. I can do this. And so your brain adjusts in order to be safe, right? All the things that happens. But yet in relationships, I would expect that, oh, you're supposed to be soft. You're supposed to be a woman again. I'm just wondering how that conflict of those societal norms or those relationship norms wind up conflictual for women in law enforcement.
Yeah. So for me, it's kind of funny. I met my husband within that department, and he's since also with a different employer now. But he said I guess there was a couple things that were weird to him. Not necessarily weird, but I don't know how to describe it. I'll just give the example. One of which, I'm always somebody who will reach out a helping hand and help somebody when I see that they're struggling, which I learned from a male perspective. For instance, I call him Slimy Sergeant in the book. He's the one that like towed the line with me and slightly crossed it at one point. That interaction started in the academy. He was an instructor in the academy. He quickly got chummy with me once I got out of FTO and was on my own. But he was one of the men in the department who liked to date all the women in the department. And that was known about him. He had screwed up his first marriage because he cheated on her and then was on to somebody else in the PD, and they were engaged. And then all of a sudden that engagement blew up in like a public dumpster fire in the PD, which was sad to see anyways. And he was on our shift. He wasn't my direct sergeant, but he came in one morning to squad meeting and his face was red. His eyes were puffy. Like it looked like he had had a really rough night, knowing what he was going through. And I texted him, I said, hey, just checking in. I know you're going through a lot. Like, just want to let you know, like, I'm here if you want to talk to somebody. Like, literally, that's it. And of course, I started dating my husband after that. He's like, you know, when you do that, that makes us think that you're interested in us. Like, when you're nice to us, we assume that you're interested. And I'm like, no. Should I have been a bitch? But like,
Yeah.
what's the other end of that spectrum? Like, I don't understand. So that was the thing that my husband pointed out to me too. He was like, no, like he took that as you were interested in him. And I was like, I was literally just checking to see if he was okay. That's it.
Yes, like a buddy check.
There was no interest in that whatsoever. The other thing of it is I'm a naturally like, I don't even know if you want to call it blunt. I don't sugarcoat things. I'm just very straight and to the point. And that's how I interact with everybody. And that's how I interacted with him, even early in our relationship. And it took him a while. He even told me, he's like, it took me a while to get used to that you're just very straight and to the point. He's like, but I had to, maybe that comes off as being bitchy or I don't know, whatever else to other people. But he's like, that was something that I had to get used to. So I don't feel like I changed myself necessarily from the street to like home life or off-duty life necessarily. It was just me. But I say that to say like my husband had to adapt, I guess, to me in that sense. He was the one that had to adapt, not me.
Right. Do you think being married to an officer has that highlighted the differences in your experiences and your journey? So tell me, she's shaking her head. So tell me a little bit about what got highlighted as y'all talked and you developed this relationship and then eventually got married.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a couple different examples, and one in which is how we responded to calls, because there for a short period of time, ironically enough, he graduated the academy before me, even though I had been in law enforcement longer. I just came to that department after he did. So our batch numbers were actually only 2 numbers apart. Yeah. As far as like our higher dates were like 8 months apart, but the way they numbered the academy before us and then mine, it ended up being 2 batch numbers apart.
Okay.
So he and I were a lot of times assigned to the same area of the city. We were both on day shift because it was like low badge, you got whatever district nobody else wanted. Or high badge, rather, low seniority. And so we worked a handful of calls together, which we have a couple of funny stories from that. But generally speaking, he would be the one that would be ready to go, to like run up to somebody and throw them in handcuffs. And I'm sitting in the back going, can we chat for a minute? I'm like, slow this down. Because there's been times where I proved myself to him, essentially. It was one call where we were dealing with a guy who was high on meth and he was tearing apart this hotel. And we go and make contact with him and he starts to take off from us. Well, we both get hands on him and I didn't even think about it. But at the time, I like grabbed a shoulder and just like sunk my weight and like we both pulled him to the ground. But however, some way, shape, or form, he landed on top of him and was able, and I was like trying to grab an arm and like crank an arm back into handcuffs. And I was like, man, I'm sorry. I feel like I didn't do anything to like help you on that. And he goes, you rode the dude like a backpack.
It's like, wait, what? That's awesome.
I was like, I'm pretty sure I just blacked out. Like, I don't know what happened. My thought was, dude's going to the ground. And I just like sunk my weight on him. So he's like, after that day, I knew you were good. Like, you were fine. I was like, okay, thanks, I guess. I mean,
yeah.
just for the moment. But we responded to calls differently. Guys are bigger, stronger. He's not huge, but he's, I don't know, got 50, 75 pounds on me, taller guy. So he can strong arm somebody into cuffs where I'm going to dance around a room and maybe talk to somebody for as long as I can until you force me to put hands on you. Then I'm going to go hands on with you.
Yeah.
But the other side of that was the experience that we had. His was radically different.
Mm-hmm.
He's the type of person that doesn't really like conflict other than being like a street cop and having to solve other people's conflict. Like when it's his own conflict, he tries to avoid it.
That's not uncommon.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he was very well liked, as he should be, but he wasn't the one that was like ruffling people's feathers because he would just like stay quiet if something happened. But in the first part of that book, I talk about like high school reindeer games and somewhat of that bullying and the clique that was on day shift with us. And actually he originated as a part of that clique. And then when he and I started talking, I actually tried to like pull him out of that clique because I could see how like nasty it was because he was always the blunt of their jokes. And I'm like, come over here, come hang out with me. Like, that doesn't look too fun type of thing. And so he started, I think at that point, his eyes started opening because that clique would make fun of him, but they would include him in all their stuff. To me, they just like made fun of me and like shunned me. So like, so his eyes started opening, I think, when he's like, yeah, this isn't so fun anymore of being a part of this clique. And then just as things went on, he's like, I never realized anything was negative about this place until you and I started talking and like seeing things through your eyes. And even then it was kind of tough because he was like the positive, optimistic one, like trying to keep things in a positive light when I was like struggling. And at one point it almost split us up like early in our relationship. He's like, because if you're going to be this negative and down in the dumps, like, I don't know if this is going to work for me. And so I tried really hard for a good while to change my perspective, to be more positive, to leave work at work. But there were signs early on that he would tell me, he's like, your demeanor completely changes like the night before we have to go back to work. I was like, sorry.
I would imagine like you have to armor up in a certain way, in a different way, right? So I talk about emotional armor, but your emotional armor is probably thicker, if you will, because you're having to armor up for many different reasons. And so I can imagine that the weight of that, he would see it.
Yeah. Well, the sad thing is that internal affairs process that happened to me, he was like collateral in it all. And so he actually came back from that. I basically they gave me a shift letter that was like a 3-year shift letter. I signed my letter and like handed in my resignation at the same time. I was like, bye. Um, he decided to hang around because he didn't have a plan B, which that was at the point that I started 50 Fierce and Fit, my coaching business for nutrition and fitness coaching programs. I jumped and figured out how to fly on the way down because maybe it was God, maybe it was the universe, however you want to look at it. My income surpassed my full-time income like that same week that I went out. So it all lined up, thankfully. But for him, like, I want to make sure I make the right next move, which took him another year, and I think a year and a half after that was when he was able to start somewhere else. So he was like hanging around, but then he was way down in the dumps after that because he's like, well, I also have a 3-year shift letter and I'm on patrol, which there meant basically if you wanted to apply to a specialty unit or apply for promotions, like the chief had to waive that because it was a disciplinary thing. And I was like, they're going to waive that for you. That was like literally just like a formality for you. They were just targeting me and I'm gone. So I guess they got what they wanted. But at the same time, you talk about gaslighting. I was told that my reaction was a knee-jerk reaction. And I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to react to your disrespect in the way that I did. Excuse me. So
That's, yeah. I mean, I know in your title of the book, you talk about, I don't know if it specifically says, I don't think it specifically says abuse, but somewhere in there, the toxicity that exists in some departments, if it's a relationship, and this goes for a lot of employers, but if it's a relationship, like, would you put up with that if it was a relationship? This is a relationship. And so it is difficult for women. And I love how you are putting it to say, like, hey, look, it's okay for you to have boundaries, but you're pointing out some really typical aspects of being a woman, which is if I'm assertive, I'm a bitch, right? Or if I respond in a timely fashion because this just makes sense, I'm reactionary, I'm emotional. And so some of that wording and watching for that, if you are at a department, is really important to point out whether or not you're in a toxic environment or not, right? Let me shift because I want to move into your business. You mentioned that 50 Fit and Fierce. There's a lot of F's in there. Part of that is I had read that you've been doing this a long time. And it sounds like it started with the physicality, the nutrition, doing things that direction. And then you've grown it into different aspects. And I know you also have your book now. So how can women in law enforcement take care of themselves? I'm going to use your word. Take care of themselves and thrive inside the thin blue line, because that's your book. So what are some things that you would recommend for women to be able to take care of themselves?
Yes. So it's 5-0, 50 Fierce and Fit is the name. 50.
I'll drop that.
50 to the
bullied
side. But yeah, Fierce and Fit. That's what I hope women aspire to be, especially in law enforcement or in life. I lay out in my book, and there's a visual that I put in some of my presentations when I teach or do the keynote speeches. It's called the Pyramid of Health. And so envision just like a normal pyramid. The bottom tier is sleep. The next tier is self-care. The next tier is nutrition. And then the last one, the very top one, is exercise. And so that's how I teach basically your own self-care and taking care of yourself, because that's the way we should prioritize it. A lot of times when you get into diet culture, it's, oh, I got to get in the gym. Oh, I got to change my diet. All these things. And people will flip the pyramid upside down and attack it from the top instead of the bottom up. And especially when you get into career fields like first responders or any other high stress, anything, we forget about the sleep. We pride ourselves on running ragged on 3 or 4 hours of sleep and about 3 different energy drinks. And we forget about the self-care, which I call it self-care because I don't venture too off into the mental health realm of things, but essentially it's your own self-care and prioritizing your mental health. So things I say like journaling, reading, meditating, going for a walk, any hobby, anything that fills your cup or brings you joy. And taking 10 to 15 minutes a day to throw those into your routine, because a lot of women will be like, yeah, self-care day would be great. Like spend a whole day at the the salon, do the pedicure, do the massage. Like, I don't have time for that. And I'm like, for one, you should do that. However, let's do something that's like realistically like daily, like a day-to-day practice type thing that you can make time for you. Because once you start doing that for yourself, you're going to hate it when you don't have it. Because now you're so used to it. You're in survival mode. It's just go, 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 go. And you're running on empty. And you don't realize how that's not only affecting you, it's affecting how you show up for others and everybody around you too. So that's the very basics of it, would be prioritizing first your sleep, your self-care. Those are probably interchangeable, honestly. But we all know if you don't sleep enough, like literally not much happens. And the same thing is if your mental health is in the gutter, not much good comes from that either. So that's why those two are the bottom ones. And then you start to focus on the nutrition, whole foods, eating at home, trying to keep the eating out to more of a minimum, giving yourself less processed foods, things that are naturally occurring in nature, those types of things. And then from there, working on your exercise, which would be if you can get moving 30 minutes 3 times a week, starting with walking, perhaps, if you're not even in the gym, joining a group class, getting a membership somewhere, finding a coach that can help you is probably the best piece of advice I can give for nutrition and the exercise piece of it. Just because we don't know what we don't know. And a lot of women especially get intimidated going into a gym just because they don't know what they're doing, or they fear of people watching them, or not getting hurt is a big one too, which of course we want this to help us, not to hurt us, which is a cool thing. Actually, just last week, I walked a new client through how to do a back squat, just like completely virtually, of like watching her movement, because she's like, I'm afraid of doing this. Can I substitute it? And I was like, well, what's the problem here? She's like, I'm just afraid to do it. I was like, I got you. We'll work through this. So you need to have a mentor in some way, I think, especially as a female in the gym. If it's something you've never done, find a coach, find some programming, find something to help you out, because the gym is just something you don't want to go through blindly. But also same with nutrition as well. If you don't have any guidance there, there's so much contradictory information on the internet when it comes to nutrition and fitness that I think it's so important to find a coach or a mentor that has a background in it or knows what they're doing, can get people results. And especially for first responders too, and anybody that has goofy schedules, somebody who understands your lifestyle. They're not just trying to shame you and say, well, the personal trainer, which is an example somebody gave me, the personal trainer got pissed at them because they didn't show up to their gym at 6 a.m. or whatever their scheduled time was, or they had to cancel last minute because insert the blank of whatever happened on shift the night before,
Exactly.
And so they're like, this didn't help. It just made me feel worse. And so instead, most women are shocked when they come to me and I'm like, get your sleep. Please sleep in. If you need to reschedule something with me, I would rather you reschedule. I'm not mad about it. I get it. So it's more of like prioritizing yourself before even trying to even go down the road of like shaming yourself for like the food you had to have because last night was crazy or the workout you missed.
What do you think are some of the most common struggles that people come to you with when you have women that are coming to you that they finally reach out? Where are they? And then I'm going to say, where are you able to, as a team, where are you able to take them?
A lot of women, the main thing is they don't know where to start. They've either tried something before or it's not worked, or they've just accepted. Maybe I had a female who told me, well, I've been big my whole life. I was starting to accept that it was genetics. You get the whole genetic thing thrown into the equation, like one of those hot topics, right? They're on some sort of medication usually, whether they're pre-diabetic or their doctor's already given them a GLP-1 like Ozempic, or high blood pressure, or maybe like mental health medications. They're usually on some sort of medication when they come to me, and usually just lacking energy and motivation to really do anything, which I always tell, people come at me and say, well, I'm just not motivated. I'm like, it's not that you're not motivated. It's that you don't know what to do. Nobody's motivated to run their head to the same brick wall and get the same result. If you know it's going to get you results, the motivation will be there because you'll see that it's working, and then you'll want to keep doing more of it.
Yes.
So I hate that. It breaks my heart when they come to me. They're like, I'm just lazy. I don't have any motivation. I was like, you're not lazy. You just don't know what to do.
That
Please
really
don't call
quickly,
yourself lazy.
those are my two, as a clinician, those are my two. They're like, I'm just lazy. I'm like, no, you just make different decisions. If you want to make, I think in somewhere you have, I think it's one of your pillars, like make the next best decision or something like that. You have to have that somewhere in your content. And I thought, yes, that's the thing. That's about the lazy. And then the other thing, the motivation, I'm like, there's no motivation pill. That whole thing. There was a commercial a long time ago, like a body at rest stays at rest. I'm like, no, that's true. That's true. Like your brain, your body is like, let's just conserve some energy and do nothing. So
Mhm.
you have to say, I'm going to make this next decision. So it sounds like that's a big part of what you do. Sorry to interrupt. Keep
No,
going.
you're good. You're good. Yeah, it's more of doing the best you can with what you have.
Mhm.
To summarize that. But as far as getting them to the end result, what I'm seeing more lately, and this is of course as my business and coaching programs have expanded. But the cool thing for me is that not only do they get to at least, I usually work with everybody for at least 6 months, 6 to 12 months, just depending. 6 months is the initial program, and then after that, it's up to them if they want to continue after that. Most of them will lose anywhere between 10 to 45 pounds, I think was the most somebody
Mm.
lost in 6 months. Usually it's more of the inches that come off because obviously if you're losing a little bit of fat and gaining a little bit of muscle, those scales not going to move as much. So that's not really a good indicator of progress always. The biggest thing is you'll see the inches, the waist will come in and they'll look like they have lost like 40, 50 pounds and like the scale moved 10 pounds. I was like, you can throw that scale away. It's not doing anything for you now. But you have the physical transformation. But for me, the cool thing is the mental transformation because now it's like, and even just this week too, I got a couple check-in calls where they're like, I set boundaries now where I don't feel like I'm run thin. When I go out to drink with friends, I don't feel pressured to drink because I realize how it makes me feel when I do choose to drink. I have people saying like, I shut work off now. I leave it at work and I go kayak on the weekends because I used to love kayaking. I forgot about it and now it's in my weekly routine. So that's the cool thing. You see them really, there's a perspective shift somewhere in the middle of those 6 months that I work with them usually, where they're like, nope, I'm not putting up with the crap I used to put up with in the past because now I see how well this is serving me. And it really fuels, it's like the inner work that really fuels their confidence because they also too are more resilient to like the negative opinions and the negativity that comes with it. And I explained it to one of my clients this week, and because I've gone through the same thing too with in my own healing process. It's like the bubble soccer when the people put on the bubbles or whatever it's
Yes.
called, and they like run, they like bounce off each other. Like I tell them,
Yes.
like, that's my bubble of peace now. I feel like I'm just like putting on like one of those little like soccer bubble things. And so if anybody runs at me or I get something that like comes at me, I'm just like, nope, you're gonna bounce out of my bubble of peace.
That's
Um,
awesome. I can
yeah,
picture that. Boop. Yeah.
yep, yep. So I think they figure that out on their own too of what they're willing to accept and what they're not. And it's super cool because you see towards the end, they might have the confidence in themselves to go for the thing that they've been debating, whether it's like a promotion or they're debating on switching departments or the cool thing, one of my clients recently was like, now I have enough information on like helping you with your protein and your workouts and stuff that I'm like helping other people at my department to do the stuff that you taught me to do, which is like the ultimate ripple effect,
Yeah, the
which I
ripple
love so
effect.
much. Yeah. And her kids, she's like, my kids are like my biggest fans. They love working out with me. They help me take my progress pictures. I can throw my kid on my shoulder and run her up and down the stairs now when I used to never be able to like walk up the stairs without being out of
Mhm.
breath. So it's really like getting their lives back. And some of them will say that, be like, I got me back. Like, I just want me back. I got me back and I got my life back. So most people at the front end see it as like, well, I'm going on a diet or however they want to look at it, like it's a
Right.
nutrition and fitness program. But really what my goal is to make that mental shift as well. It's like you do the work for the body transformation, but the mind transformation follows with it.
I figured that was a big part of it, was the mind transformation. That's why I got excited when you started talking about that, because that's part of what you're talking about in the departments is being able to set the boundaries, being able we started this interview and you were talking about that the goalpost is always changing. And so my guess is that along the way, what happens is you're empowering these women to decide, I don't want to go with that goalpost. This is my boundary. My family is important. My health is important.
Mhm.
And maybe I know we talked about support, compassion, and connection, but it sounds like some of that connection and that compassion is with themselves
Mhm.
and supporting themselves and getting through the career or through these challenges as well. So you could probably twist that away all kinds of ways. So
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing for me to see too is that, I've coached a handful of women too who have been in departments and experienced those similar challenges that I
mm,
have, and I've been able to slowly get them to believe that they deserve more than how they're being treated, essentially. And eventually a couple of them have branched out and either moved on from departments, or one female paused and actually left the career field for a little bit and it plans to go back. She unfortunately had like a bad TBI and some other things that happened to her inside of a jail. But it's empowering to see them move on and then their lives get better because they made the choice to move somewhere else. And again, it's not my doing, but it's cool when they come back and say like, thank you for helping me doing that, because I don't think I would have done it on my own. So
it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
When if people can't work with you one-on-one, I know your book is out there. What are the main takeaways that people are going to get from the book?
From the book, I believe I highlight things that I think for too long we have chalked up as being part of the job. And being part of like the suck it up buttercup, this is how it is, deal with it, or don't let the door hit you in the ass when you leave. Well, you can throw in politics, you can throw in the current state of the world, you can throw in all these things, but the current state of policing and probably first responder fields in general is that we're not willing to deal with that anymore. Male, female, I don't care. Like, we're not willing to deal with that. We're not willing to drag ourselves through the mud forever and ever and ever and retire miserable and then
die 2 years later.
Yeah, and die a couple of years later. Yeah.
Right.
And so I highlight a lot of those red flags because the red flags are not just specific to me. It's happened to a lot of other men and women. We have another buddy and the same thing happened to him and he's still there. But he spoke up about something and got his ass dragged through another internal affairs investigation, which the difference was he had a different IA captain who basically swatted it instead of the one that I had at the time. But he got targeted in the same way. And it was another male, just because he ruffled the wrong feathers, essentially. So it's not just specific to me. It's not just specific to women. There's plenty of other guys that will say that they deal with toxic crap in their departments too. So I think it's calling it out. For me, in my healing journey too, the biggest thing I found were those terms that validated things for me. Those emotional abuse terms that I found that validated for me. Moving the goalposts, the gaslighting, the bullying, the trauma bonding. It's very much like we learn in the academy, the domestic violence wheel, like the power and control wheel. A lot of that is so freaking similar and it can be applied to any toxic work environment. It's just you're replacing your spouse with like an environment of people, but still receiving the same abuse. So, and that's part of the reason for me expanding my niche, because I think toxic work environment can apply to anybody, anywhere.
Absolutely.
So calling those things out, recognizing that you deserve better, that you deserve to be valued, supported, and respected, no matter where you're at, whether it's at work, whether it's a relationship, a home, any of those things. So calling out those things because they're not commonly talked about. I do have identifying abuse, I think, on the book. Yeah, identifying abuse, which I think some people might cringe when I say that. But again, calling a spade, I don't sugarcoat things. That's just me.
Yeah, because you're talking about it being toxic work environments. And I agree with you. Like, it's a relationship. Why are you going to commit to just being paid to be in a toxic relationship? So, yeah. Okay.
So it's validating those experiences because, again, others will resonate if they've ever been in a toxic relationship, because I had one that was borderline narcissistic too, of just like getting that validation of not feeling like you're crazy, because other people will make you crazy, but you're not. It's completely valid. So getting that validation, but also getting the motivation and the inspiration to do something about it.
That's
so
awesome.
Also in that book is everything we just talked about as far as that pyramid of health, covering all of the sleep, self-care, nutrition, fitness, advice. It's like the first place to get yourself started. It is foundational. It is somewhat basic, if you will, but it's that way on purpose because it's meant to give you a starting point and not to go into the weeds and confuse you. To help you take your life back, take your control back, start focusing on prioritizing your mental and physical health. Because once you do that, then you're able to better assess everything else that's going on around you, whether it's your work environment or something else that needs to change. Because the biggest thing that happened for me in my healing journey too was just gaining clarity on what I wanted out of my own life. Because everything, even still, and I'm seeing now full transparency in my business and where it was built out of survival mode. It was, hey, I need to get the hell out of Dodge. I need an income. I need clients. I need income. And that was 2022. So fast forward 3 years later, it's evolving into other things because it's no longer just that. It's evolved into so much. So I encourage anybody to grab that book if you've dealt with any sort of struggles inside of a work environment and also need some help as far as taking care of your own mental and physical health. It doesn't mean that you need to drop a bunch of weight or all of these other things, like not encouraging you to do that if you're not in a place, if you're like, hey, I'm like somewhat healthy, but maybe it's you're feeling some symptoms with chronic stress. That's the other thing I'm leaning into and identifying now that I've been through the ringer with doctors who can't figure out what was wrong with my own body. Chronic stress, that hypervigilance, being in that fight or flight mode where your nervous system can't downregulate, it caused my body to crash out. And I've been on a healing journey for the last 3 years. I'm still not completely out of the woods with it yet. But even highlighting those symptoms of chronic stress that, again, it's like those little things that people don't really look at until all of a sudden things hit the fan and you're like, what happened? So that's another big point that I like to just tell people about so that maybe they recognize it before it happens. When it happened to me, I was like, well, this is annoying that I'm living on Tums and Excedrin because I always have migraines and I always have gut issues and skin issues and things that just how they accelerated when I was in that environment. So identifying those signs, those initial red flags, whether it's work environment, whether it's chronic stress, and then the tools and the resources to help you reverse that and take care of you.
It sounds like a really valuable book with a lot of great information in there. So I know it's available online, and so y'all can pick it up there as well. One other question. If there are, because many times I have spouses listening that are not in the field, what would you want a spouse to know that has a female officer that they're married to or connected with or supporting? What do you want what should that non-sworn, if you will, spouse or partner, what would you want them to know in order to support their female first responder or law enforcement officer?
Yeah, I think it just comes from talking to them, honestly. Keeping an open dialogue, listening to them, and maybe even just letting them vent. That was the one thing I had to teach my husband too. Like, you don't always have to solve my problem. Like, sometimes I just want to vent to you. Just leaving that communication open, because I think that's the biggest thing I suggest to my coaching clients of like, do you have somebody to talk to?
Yeah.
Whether it's a loved one or a counselor or a therapist, like, do you have somebody to talk to? Because that's the first line of like your support system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So leaving that open where they know that you're a safe space for them, I think will go a super long way. And if you're able to listen to some of the gory details sometimes and that not further affect you for some of those more tragic type calls, it could be beneficial too. Again, just to talk, just for processing. I mean, you're a licensed counselor, you know this. But even just to like process what happened, to get it off your chest, something that helps you work through that. Because one thing that I learned also within my healing journey is that there were things like way in my past that I held on to for too long that I didn't even realize that was still like in my subconscious or even had like emotions tied to it. So, and it was because I wasn't able to process it at the time. So I think just talking about it is like that first step to processing anything.
Just leaving that door to communication. Non-judgment is what I hear. Just not trying to fix it, just support, letting them be heard. I think there's so much value in just feeling that support, feeling validated, or the empathy that you're talking about. And it's as easy as that.
Yep.
Let's do all the things. How do people get a hold of you? Where's your podcast? What if they're like, oh my gosh, I want some one-on-one. I know you do speaking with departments. So give us the rundown and I will put everything in the show notes, guys, or you can scribble and make notes really quickly, but it should be all be in the show notes for the links. But let's get that all out there so everybody can get a hold of you.
Yeah. So I recently compiled everything into a website. Yay, technology. I think I put that on the back burner for too long. It is www.5, written out FIVE 0, fierceandfit.com/info. That should have everything on there from ways you can connect with me for speaking, for one-on-one coaching. The podcast link should be in there. And then all my social media links should be down at the bottom of that site as well. So probably the best in the book, the link to buy the book, I believe. But the book is also on Amazon.
Yes.
So you can snag that from Amazon. But yeah, the website's probably the best. You can search my name on social media. You'll probably find me that way too if you'd rather just follow along. But yeah, it should all be together in one place instead of, I got tired of getting on podcasts and talking to different people. And I was like, well, you can find me on this. And like the list just got longer of like all the platforms that I'm on. So I was like, I have one website. Yay.
I found that last night and I was like, oh, okay. And I just kept scrolling. So I was like, this is comprehensive.
Yeah.
So yeah, so everything's there. Go check out her website, check out her book, check out her coaching as well if you're interested in that. I failed to mention, like she's a former gymnast. Is that right?
Division 1. So
Division, like
yeah, NCAA Division 1 gymnast.
yeah, like a big thing. So she knows what she's talking about. It's not like somebody who just said like, I think I'm going to start doing physical fitness stuff. So she knows what she's doing. And that's part of why I wanted her combination of experience, I think is really valuable. And I hope y'all have enjoyed this. Is there any last words that you would like to leave people with?
I've got 2, I've been leaning into my credos here lately, but you're one decision away from a totally different life. And we rise by lifting others, but first we must lift ourselves.
Oh, those are so good. Monica, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate your time. And I know everybody listening is going to gain something out of this for sure.
Sure. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, you guys.
Absolutely. Y'all stay safe. Just by the way, just make sure to check out my code4couples.com website. I do have the appreciation challenge still there. Also, I have the top 10 things every law enforcement spouse should know. So if you are a officer and you think your spouse needs to be schooled on some things, that would be a good list. Or if you are a spouse, that's a good list to go and grab, and those are free. And if you want updates on the podcast, make sure to subscribe to the list as well. But until then, guys, everybody, y'all keep it Code4. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about the podcast or Cyndi, check out code4couples.com. All intellectual property rights owned by CRLD2 Ventures, LLC, are protected by the firm of 9mm, 45 ACP, 5.56mm, and 12 gauge.